The rain poured like shattered glass from a broken sky, drumming against the deserted streets of a small town. Neon signs flickered weakly, reflecting in the rising puddles as thunder rumbled overhead. In that storm, a young girl stumbled barefoot, her white dress torn, clinging to her skin. Her breaths came out in short, panicked gasps as she sprinted through the darkness, eyes wide with terror. Each step left a splash of muddy water mixed with fresh blood from her scraped feet. Behind her, a shadow followed. His heavy boots crushed through the rain with steady determination, the sound far louder than the thunder. He didn't rush, he didn't need to. He knew she had nowhere left to run. Her trembling hands pressed against her chest as she darted into an alley, hoping the storm would hide her. But the moment she turned, lightning cracked across the sky, revealing him, broad, towering, his face twisted with rage. "Think you can run from me?" His voice roared above the rain, venom dripping from every word. The girl froze, pressing herself against the cold brick wall, water streaming down her face like tears she no longer had the strength to cry. She whispered a desperate prayer under her breath, but the storm drowned it out. The man stepped closer, a cruel grin spreading across his face. He raised his hand, ready to strike. And then, a sound cut through the storm. Not thunder. Not wind. Engines. Low, guttural, and growing louder with every second. The street began to vibrate as if the earth itself was trembling. The man's smug grin faltered. He turned his head, rain dripping down his brow, eyes narrowing into the darkness. From the mist and downpour, headlamps pierced through like angry eyes. 1. Then 2. Then a dozen. Roaring motorcycles rolled into the street, their chrome glinting beneath flashes of lightning. The storm no longer belonged to him, it belonged to them. The girl's abuser froze as the wall of engines surrounded him, trapping him like prey in a hunter's circle. The leader of the bikers cut the engine, silence falling for just a moment. Then, in a voice that could slice through the storm, he said, "You picked the wrong night to lay a hand on her." The girl's name was Emily. Just 16, with a smile once bright enough to light up any room. But for the past 2 years, that smile had been stolen, buried beneath bruises no one dared to ask about. Her stepfather, Richard, had come into her life like a dark storm. At first, he pretended to be caring, a man who promised her mother security after years of struggle. But beneath his polished charm was a cruel heart. Slowly, the house turned into a prison. Every mistake Emily made, no matter how small, was punished. A glass left on the counter, a book not returned to its shelf, even a laugh that lasted too long, each became an excuse for him to unleash his rage. Her mother, fragile and afraid, tried to intervene at first. But Richard's words cut as deeply as his fists. He convinced her she was worthless, that no one else would ever want her. By the time Emily begged her mother to leave, it was too late, fear had chained her to him. School wasn't an escape either. Emily withdrew into herself, wearing long sleeves even in summer, avoiding questions from teachers who suspected but never pressed. The friends she once had drifted away, confused by her silence. She carried her pain quietly, like a secret she couldn't afford to share. The night of the storm began with Richard's drunken rage. He had come home slamming doors, the sharp smell of whiskey trailing behind him. Emily had been sitting at the kitchen table, sketching in her worn notebook, the only place she still felt free. He grabbed the pages from her hands, sneering at the delicate drawings she poured her heart into. "What is this garbage? You think you're going to be an artist? Nobody cares what you draw." When she tried to snatch it back, his fist met her cheek. Her mother screamed, but Richard shoved her aside, his voice booming through the house. Emily didn't wait, she ran. Barefoot, heart pounding, out into the storm. She didn't know where she was going. All she knew was anywhere was better than home. But Richard followed. He always did. His boots echoed in her mind as she ran through the streets, each step reminding her that escape wasn't simple. What neither of them knew was that fate had placed eyes upon them that night. The local biker brotherhood, a tight-knit group of men bound not by crime, but by loyalty and justice, had been riding through town. Their president, Jack Iron Hand Walker, had grown up in that very neighborhood. He knew the look of fear when he saw it, and when his headlight caught sight of Emily sprinting barefoot in the rain, every instinct told him she wasn't just running, she was fleeing. Jack slowed, signaling to his brothers. They exchanged glances, no words needed. They had seen too many nights where innocence was crushed under cruelty, and tonight they weren't going to let it happen again. Emily's world had always been one of silence, teachers who looked away, neighbors who pretended not to hear the shouting, relatives who said it wasn't their place. But for the first time, the silence was about to be broken by the thunder of engines. The storm wasn't the only thing rising that night. So was justice. Richard had never been a man who tolerated defiance. To him, fear was control, and control was everything. As he stood there in the rain, facing his stepdaughter and the sudden wall of motorcycles, his pride boiled hotter than the storm itself. At first, he laughed. A deep, menacing laugh that carried through the thunder. "You think a bunch of leather-clad misfits scare me?" he spat, water dripping from his jaw. "She's mine. She belongs to me. And nobody takes what's mine." Emily flinched at his words, her arms wrapping around herself as if the rain alone couldn't hide her trembling. Those words, "she's mine," were ones she had heard 100 times behind closed doors. To Richard, she was never a daughter. She was property. Jack Iron Hand didn't move. Neither did the circle of bikers. Engines still rumbled softly, a heartbeat of defiance. But Richard mistook their silence for weakness. His drunken confidence grew. He stepped closer to Emily, his voice booming through the storm. "Come here, girl. Right now. Or I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life." Emily's bare feet inched backward on the slick pavement, blood mixing with the rain. Her chest heaved, torn between terror and the faint spark of hope she felt as the bikers stood their ground. Richard's hand clenched into a fist. His body was soaked, his eyes wild. He had been feared for so long that he couldn't imagine anyone stopping him. Not the neighbors. Not the police. Not even her mother. And certainly not these men on motorcycles. "Last warning," he snarled, pointing at Emily, then at Jack. "Get out of my way. She's coming with me, or I'll put every one of you in the ground." The bikers didn't flinch. Helmets tilted, eyes locked, bodies solid as stone. They had faced worse threats before, but this wasn't about them. This was about the trembling girl whose whole life had been stolen by the man standing in front of them. The storm grew heavier, wind whipping through the street. Richard raised his hand again, his knuckles whitening. He believed he was still in control. But the sound of engines revving in unison told a different story. Tonight, his reign of terror was about to end. The night air split with the deafening roar of engines as the bikers tightened their circle, chrome and steel glistening under each flash of lightning. Their headlights cut through the rain like fiery beacons, trapping Richard in the middle of a storm far greater than he could ever control. Emily's breath caught in her throat. For the first time in years, she didn't feel completely alone. The way the bikers surrounded her abuser, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. It was protection. Jack Iron Hand Walker dismounted his bike with a slow, purposeful motion. He was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered, his leather vest marked with the insignia of their brotherhood, Iron Brotherhood MC. His boots splashed into the puddles as he stepped forward, pulling off his helmet. Rain soaked his silver-streaked beard, but his eyes burned steady, unwavering. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His voice carried the kind of weight that silence itself seemed to respect. "Touch her again," Jack said evenly, "and you'll answer to all of us." One by one, the other bikers killed their engines and removed their helmets. Their faces, hardened by life but softened by loyalty, glared through the storm. Every one of them carried scars, physical and invisible, that told stories of battles fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Emily blinked through the rain, her heart hammering. She had heard stories whispered about this group, men who rode like ghosts through the night, who stood up for kids and women when no one else dared. Many called them outlaws. But looking at them now, Emily knew they weren't outlaws. They were guardians. Richard sneered, though his bravado faltered. You think you're heroes? You're nothing but thugs on wheels. He jabbed a finger toward Emily. She's my blood, my responsibility. You've got no right. Jack's jaw tightened. He stepped closer until he was just inches away from Richard, his presence towering, immovable. She's a child. And you stopped being her family the moment you raised your hand to her. The bikers rumbled in agreement, fists tightening at their sides. One, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, leaned forward. Brother, say the word, he growled to Jack. But Jack lifted his hand, signaling patience. This wasn't about violence. Not yet. Instead, he turned to Emily, lowering his tone. You're safe now, sweetheart. He can't hurt you anymore. The girl's lips trembled, a sob threatening to escape, but she nodded, clinging to the words as if they were lifelines. Richard's face twisted with rage. He wasn't used to losing control. His voice rose, thunderous, trying to cover his fear. You can't take her. I'll have the cops on all of you. You'll rot in prison for this. Jack smirked faintly, unshaken. Funny thing about justice, he said. Sometimes it rides faster than the law. The bikers chuckled low, a sound more intimidating than any roar. Their unity wasn't just muscle, it was conviction. They weren't here to be criminals. They were here because too many times, they'd seen people like Emily ignored, abandoned, or silenced. Tonight, they would not let that cycle continue. Emily looked around the circle of men, their leather cuts gleaming with patches of honor earned, not bought. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had only dreamed of before, protection, real and unshakable. Richard, drenched and trembling though he tried to hide it, realized too late that the storm he thought he controlled had turned against him. The bikers weren't leaving. They were preparing. And soon, the entire town would know what happens when a man tries to break a girl under the watch of the Iron Brotherhood. The street had gone deathly still, except for the rain hammering against metal and asphalt. Richard's chest heaved as he looked around, realizing there was no escape. The circle of bikers had tightened, their boots planted firmly in the puddles, their leather jackets glistening with rain. Every eye was fixed on him, unblinking. But Richard, drunk on arrogance and fury, wasn't ready to surrender. He puffed out his chest, his words dripping with venom. You think you can humiliate me in front of her? I'll... Before he could finish, Jack's hand shot out, gripping Richard's wrist mid-swing. The impact of that simple act was thunderous. Richard froze, his fist trembling inches away from Emily's face. Jack's voice rumbled like the storm overhead. You won't lay another finger on her. Not tonight. Not ever. Richard tried to yank free, but Jack's grip was iron, unyielding. The bikers moved in closer, their presence suffocating. The leader turned his gaze toward the girl. Emily, Jack said gently, even as his hand locked Richard in place, you don't have to be afraid anymore. Say the word, and this ends. For a long moment, Emily couldn't speak. Her lips parted, but the years of silence weighed on her like chains. The memories of bruises, broken plates, screams behind locked doors, they all crashed down on her. But then, she saw the truth, Richard wasn't invincible. For the first time, he looked small, cornered, weak. Her voice cracked, but it rang out. Stop hurting me. The words hit harder than any fist. Richard's face twisted, but before he could retaliate, the bikers erupted. One man shoved him back against the wall, pinning him by the collar. Another yanked away the belt Richard had once used as a weapon, throwing it into the gutter. The rest formed a barricade around Emily, their jackets shielding her like a wall of leather and steel. Everybody's watching now, growled the scarred biker, pressing Richard into the bricks. Your reign's over. Indeed, curtains parted in nearby windows. Neighbors who had turned a blind eye for years now peered into the storm. Some filmed with trembling hands, others gasped at the sight of a man finally facing the justice he had long evaded. Jack raised his voice, projecting for all to hear. This girl has been beaten, broken, and silenced under his roof. No more. Tonight, the silence ends. A cheer rose from the bikers, their fists pumping the air. Emily, shivering and soaked, felt strength surge in her chest. For the first time, someone believed her. Richard, desperate, tried to sneer. "You'll regret this, every last one of you." But the words fell flat. No one feared him anymore. Jack leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that sliced sharper than a blade. "The only one regretting anything tonight is you." Then, in a show of raw unity, the bikers turned Richard toward the gathering crowd. Jack lifted his chin, his voice ringing above the storm. "Let every man here see what happens when you raise your hand to a child. This ends tonight." The crowd outside grew larger, neighbors stepping out, phones raised, some shouting in agreement. Richard's power wasn't just crumbling, it was gone. Emily took a shaky step forward. Her hair clung to her face, her feet raw from running, but her eyes locked on Richard with a courage she never knew she had. Her small voice, trembling but fierce, cut through the storm. "You don't own me." The bikers parted slightly, giving her room. Jack nodded to her, silently promising she had the floor. For once, Richard had no answer. No threat. No strength. Just silence. The storm that had once drowned her cries now carried her victory. And in that moment, with the Iron Brotherhood standing like giants around her, Emily's chains shattered. The storm began to ease, as if even the heavens had been waiting for this moment. The rain softened into a steady drizzle, washing blood and tears into the gutters. Emily stood taller now, her breath steadying, her voice no longer trembling. The weight that had pressed on her chest for years was gone, lifted by the engines that thundered in her defense. Richard, soaked and defeated, was handed over to the flashing blue lights that finally arrived, summoned by neighbors' calls, but far too late to claim any credit. The police cuffed him, but it wasn't their justice that mattered. It was the bikers who had stood when no one else would. Emily's mother rushed into the street, her face pale with shock and guilt. She clutched Emily, sobbing apologies, whispering that she had been too afraid. Emily held her, but her gaze kept drifting back to the circle of bikers, the men who had made her believe in hope again. Jack replaced his helmet, his expression unreadable, though his eyes softened as he looked at the girl. "You're stronger than you know, kid," he said quietly. "Don't ever forget that." The other bikers mounted their rides, engines rumbling back to life. They didn't wait for thanks or applause. That wasn't why they were there. They had done what needed to be done, and now it was time to disappear into the night. Emily called out, her voice breaking. "Wait." Jack paused, glancing over his shoulder. Through the mist and the hum of engines, Emily whispered two words that carried everything she felt. "Thank you." Jack gave a small nod, the kind only a man of few words could give, then twisted the throttle. One by one, the Iron Brotherhood vanished into the rain, their red taillights glowing like embers until the storm swallowed them whole. Emily stood in the middle of the street, barefoot and broken but finally free. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to smile, small, fragile, but real. The bikers had become her unsung heroes. And the night that once nearly ended her, had instead saved her. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Your support helps keep these voices alive.